They say blood is thicker than water. But what happens when that blood turns toxic and drains you dry? My own sister, Clara, the same one I shared secrets and silly childhood dreams with, meticulously plotted and executed the theft of my entire inheritance. $5 million meant to secure my future. Then, years later, when her gilded cage of stolen wealth crumbled, she had the audacity, the sheer gall, to crawl back to me, the sister she'd financially eviscerated, begging for a bailout from the very bankruptcy her greed had wrought. This isn't just a story of betrayal. It's a raw, visceral account of how I navigated that agonizing chasm of sisterly love turned to bitter resentment and the chilling choices I faced when karma finally came knocking at her door. Aunt Beatrice was always an enigma, a whirlwind of sharp business acumen and eccentric charm. She built a real estate empire from the ground up, a feat she often reminded us of with a glint in her eye. Clara and I were her only living relatives, and we both knew she'd leave her considerable fortune to one of us. To say Clara and I were different would be an understatement. Clara was the dazzling social butterfly, always flitting from one party to another, draped in designer clothes and perpetually chasing the next fleeting trend. I, on the other hand, preferred quiet evenings with a book, diligently working my way up in my accounting firm. Aunt Beatrice, shrewd as she was, saw right through Clara's superficial charm. In her will, she made it abundantly clear. Her entire $5 million estate would go to me, Evelyn, the one she deemed responsible enough to handle it. The reading of the will was a tense affair. Clara's face, usually so animated, turned a ghastly shade of white. Her forced smile barely concealed the fury simmering beneath. I felt a pang of guilt, even though I hadn't influenced Aunt Beatrice's decision in any way. Later that day, Clara came to my modest apartment, her eyes red-rimmed, not from grief for our aunt, but from pure, unadulterated rage. How could she? Clara sobbed, but the theatrical performance didn't quite reach her hardened gaze. After everything I've done for this family, she leaves it all to you? I tried to reason with her, explaining Aunt Beatrice's practical nature, her belief in my financial prudence. But Clara wasn't listening. She launched into a well-rehearsed monologue about how she had always looked out for me, how she deserved a chance to finally live a life of comfort. Then came the manipulation, subtle at first, then escalating in intensity. "Evie," she began, her voice softening, "a dangerous tactic I knew all too well. You're so good with numbers, but you're cautious. This kind of money needs to be invested, made to grow. I have friends, connections. I know people in venture capital, real estate. Let me manage it for you, just for a little while. We can double it, triple it. You wouldn't have to work another day in your life." My initial instinct was to refuse outright. I knew Clara's track record with money was abysmal. She'd racked up credit card debt since her teens and had a penchant for investing in sure thing, schemes that invariably imploded. But the sheer size of the inheritance was daunting. The responsibility felt immense. Clara's words, insidious as they were, planted a seed of doubt. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was too cautious. Maybe she did deserve a chance. And, if I was honest with myself, a tiny part of me wanted to believe in her, to see her finally succeed at something. Against my better judgment, I agreed. It was the biggest mistake of my life. Clara was ecstatic. She painted a rosy picture of lucrative investments, exotic locales she'd scout for potential opportunities, and the fabulous returns we'd soon be enjoying. She insisted on setting up joint accounts, for transparency, she'd claimed, her eyes sparkling with a deceit I was too naive to recognize. I signed the papers, blinded by a misplaced sense of familial trust and the allure of a comfortable future. The first few months were filled with reassuring updates, vague but promising. Clara would call me, her voice bubbly, talking about exciting, new ventures and potential deals. I, busy with my job, didn't press for specifics. I trusted her. Foolishly, I believed my sister wouldn't betray me like this. As the years passed, Clara's lifestyle underwent a dramatic transformation. She moved into a sprawling mansion in Beverly Hills, complete with a live-in staff and a fleet of luxury cars. Her social media was a relentless parade of extravagant vacations, designer shopping sprees, and exclusive parties. When I occasionally raised questions about the investments, she'd brush them off with vague assurances, telling me not to worry my pretty little head about it. "It's all going according to plan, Evie," she'd say, her laughter echoing with an unsettling hollowness. My own life remained largely unchanged. I continued to work hard, saving diligently, believing that my substantial inheritance was safely growing under Clara's management. It wasn't until a chance encounter with an old acquaintance of Aunt Beatrice that the first tendrils of suspicion began to creep into my mind. "I saw Clara at the charity gala last week," the woman had remarked casually. "She mentioned something about Aunt Beatrice's money. Said she was having a wonderful time spending it." The words struck me like a physical blow. Spending it? Not investing it? I tried to shake off the unease, attributing it to a misunderstanding. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it began to sprout, sending thorny roots into my peace of mind. I started paying closer attention to Clara's social media, the endless stream of opulence suddenly taking on a sinister hue. I called her more frequently, my questions becoming more direct, more insistent. Her responses grew increasingly evasive, her tone shifting from breezy nonchalance to thinly veiled irritation. Finally, armed with a growing sense of dread, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I contacted the lawyer who had handled Aunt Beatrice's estate. Mr. Henderson, a seasoned professional with a calm and reassuring demeanor, listened patiently as I recounted the situation. He agreed to look into the matter, and the findings were devastating. Clara had systematically transferred the inheritance money into a complex web of offshore accounts, registered under shell corporations. The lucrative investments she had spoken of were nothing but smoke and mirrors, a carefully constructed facade to conceal her theft. The money was gone, every last penny. My sister, the person I had trusted implicitly, had robbed me blind. The betrayal cut deeper than any financial loss. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the complete and utter disregard for our family, for the trust I had placed in her. The shock gave way to a burning rage, a cold, calculating fury that settled deep within my bones. I vowed that Clara would not get away with this. I would expose her, make her pay for what she had done. Mr. Henderson, though sympathetic, painted a grim picture. Recovering the funds from offshore accounts would be a long and arduous process, with no guarantee of success. However, he assured me that we could pursue legal action against Clara for fraud and theft. And that's exactly what I decided to do. I spent the next few months working tirelessly with Mr. Henderson, meticulously gathering every piece of evidence, every email, every financial statement that pointed to Clara's guilt. It was a painstaking process, emotionally draining and financially taxing, but I was determined. I wanted justice, not just for myself, but for Aunt Beatrice, whose legacy Clara had so callously desecrated. Just as we were preparing to file the lawsuit, the news broke. Clara's carefully constructed empire of stolen wealth had come crashing down. The high-risk investments she had made, fueled by greed and a reckless disregard for consequence, had imploded. The headlines screamed of her financial ruin, her impending bankruptcy. The irony was not lost on me. Karma, it seemed, had a way of delivering its own brand of justice, often with a dramatic flair. Then came the call. It was Clara, her voice a shaky, tearful mess, barely recognizable. "Evie. Oh, Evie. I don't know what to do," she sobbed. "I've lost everything. The creditors are circling. I'm facing bankruptcy. Please help me." The audacity of it took my breath away. After years of deceit and betrayal, after stealing my entire future, she had the gall to come crawling back to me, begging for salvation. A whirlwind of emotions churned within me. Part of me, the ingrained, sisterly bond, the memories of our childhood, felt a flicker of something akin to pity. But that was quickly extinguished by the searing memory of her betrayal. The years of living a lie while I worked hard and trusted her. "Help you?" I finally managed to say, my voice cold and steady. "Clara, you stole everything from me. You left me with nothing. Why on earth would I help you?" Her sobs intensified. But we're sisters. Family. You can't just leave me to rot. And you thought about that when you were living in your mansion, buying your diamonds with my money, I retorted, the bitterness rising in my throat. "Did you think about family then, Clara?" She pleaded. She cried. She even tried to guilt trip me, reminding me of some long-forgotten childhood incident where she had supposedly protected me. But her words rang hollow, devoid of any genuine remorse. It was all about self-preservation, a desperate attempt to escape the consequences of her own greed. The truth was, over the past few years, through sheer perseverance and a stroke of unexpected luck, a small inheritance from a distant relative I barely knew, I had managed to rebuild a semblance of financial security. I wasn't wealthy, not by any stretch of the imagination, but I was comfortable. I had a modest apartment, a reliable car, and enough savings to ensure a reasonably secure future. I had clawed my way back from the brink of financial ruin, all while Clara was living a life of obscene luxury on my stolen money. Now the tables had turned. I was the one with the means, and she was the one facing the abyss. The power dynamic had shifted dramatically, and a strange sense of satisfaction, I won't lie, washed over me. It wasn't the elation I might have expected, more like a cold, quiet sense of justice being served. Clara continued her desperate pleas, her voice laced with panic. She offered to work for me, to be my personal assistant, anything to avoid the humiliation and financial devastation of bankruptcy. But her words felt insincere, manipulative even in her desperation. I listened to her cries, her pathetic attempts to tug at my heartstrings, and a profound sense of detachment settled within me. The sister I had once loved, the sister I had trusted, was gone, replaced by this desperate, entitled stranger who only saw me as a potential lifeline. "I'll think about it, Clara," I said finally, my voice flat. I hung up the phone, the silence in my apartment amplifying the turmoil within me. This was the moment I had envisioned, the moment of reckoning. I had wanted her to suffer the consequences of her actions, to understand the depth of her betrayal. And now, she was. Over the next few days, I wrestled with my conscience. Should I help her? Could I, in good faith, knowing what she had done? The practical, logical part of me screamed no. She had made her bed. Now she could lie in it. She had shown me no mercy. Why should I show her any? But then, the ghost of our shared past would flicker in my mind. The silly childhood games, the whispered secrets, the times we had leaned on each other. Was there still a shred of sisterly love left, buried beneath the layers of resentment and pain? I consulted Mr. Henderson, seeking his legal and, perhaps unintentionally, moral guidance. He reiterated the legal avenues we could still pursue, the potential for recovering at least some of the stolen funds through the bankruptcy proceedings. He also acknowledged the complex emotional aspect of the situation. "Ultimately, Evelyn," he said, his voice gentle, "the decision is yours. There is no right or wrong answer here. You have been grievously wronged. Whatever you choose to do is understandable." His words offered a strange sense of validation, but they didn't make the decision any easier. I thought about Aunt Beatrice, about her faith in me, about the way Clara had so casually squandered her legacy. I thought about my own struggle to rebuild my life, the years of hard work and sacrifice. And then I thought about Clara, the entitled, selfish woman who had taken it all away. Finally, I made my decision. When Clara called again, her voice filled with a desperate hope, I was ready. "Evie, have you thought about it? Please, you have to help me." I took a deep breath. "Yes, Clara, I've thought about it. And I've decided that I will help you." A gasp of relief escaped her lips. "Oh, thank you, Evie. Thank you. I knew you wouldn't abandon me." I cut her off before she could launch into another round of insincere gratitude. "But my help comes with conditions." There was a pause, a flicker of apprehension in her voice. "Conditions?" "Yes," I said firmly. "First, you will sign over any remaining assets you have to me. Everything. I will use those to partially recoup the money you stole." But that won't be enough to cover my debts," she stammered. "That's right," I replied coldly. "Second, you will publicly confess to your actions, to the theft of my inheritance. You will face the consequences of your crimes, both legal and social." Silence. I could almost hear the gears turning in her desperate mind, calculating her options. And if I do all that?" she asked hesitantly. "Then," I said, my voice unwavering, "I will pay for a basic bankruptcy lawyer for you. I will ensure you have a roof over your head, a small, very basic apartment. And I will provide you with a minimal monthly allowance, just enough to cover basic necessities." Another long silence. I could feel her shock, her disappointment. This wasn't the bailout she had hoped for, the return to her lavish lifestyle. This was something else entirely. "You mean, you won't just give me the money to pay off my debts?" she finally whispered, her voice laced with disbelief. "No, Clara," I said flatly. "I won't. You need to face the consequences of your actions. You need to understand the value of hard work and honesty, something you clearly never learned." There was a long, drawn-out silence on the other end of the line. I could almost see her face, the entitlement battling with the crushing reality of her situation. Finally, she spoke, her voice defeated. "So, this is it? You're going to let me live like a pauper?" "No, Clara," I corrected her. "You are going to live like someone who stole millions and squandered it all. I am giving you a second chance, a chance to rebuild your life, honestly this time. It won't be easy, but it's more than you deserve." She agreed to my conditions, her voice devoid of its usual vibrancy. The legal paperwork was drawn up, the confession made public, a humiliating ordeal for her, though it brought me a measure of grim satisfaction, and the bankruptcy proceedings began. I kept my word. I secured a small bare apartment for Clara and set up a meager monthly allowance. I didn't offer any emotional support, any words of comfort. She had severed that bond long ago. Watching her navigate her new reality was a strange experience. The once glamorous Clara now lived a life of quiet desperation, struggling to make ends meet, shunned by the society that had once embraced her. It wasn't the kind of vindictive revenge I might have initially craved, but it was a form of justice, a stark and undeniable consequence of her choices. Some might say I should have forgiven her. That family is more important than money. But forgiveness requires remorse, and I never truly saw that from Clara. What I saw was a desperate attempt to avoid the consequences of her own actions. My decision wasn't about revenge, not entirely. It was about accountability, about ensuring that Clara understood the gravity of her betrayal and the value of what she had so carelessly thrown away. It was about protecting myself from further manipulation and establishing boundaries that should have been in place all along. In the end, Clara faced her bankruptcy. She learned, perhaps for the first time in her life, what it meant to struggle. Whether she ever truly understood the depth of her wrongdoing, I can't say. But I found a measure of peace in knowing that karma, in its own way, had delivered a fitting, if not entirely satisfying, form of justice. And I, Evelyn, the sister who was robbed, had finally found a way to reclaim not just a small part of my financial security, but also my own sense of self-respect.